"What is it?" he said. "What do you want?" "That story you told us," Gretel began, but she got no further, for the young man put his hands over his ears and shook his head violently. "Don't speak of it. I wish I'd never begun it. I wish I'd never told a story in my life." "But you've got to listen to me," she said. "Something dreadful's going to happen, and I don't know what it is, because you didn't finish the story." "How do you know I didn't finish it?" he said. She showed him the sheet of paper she'd found. He groaned and put his face in his hands. "Groaning won't help," she said. "You've got to finish the story properly. What happens next?" "I don't know," he cried. "I dreamed the first part of it, and it was so strange and horrible that I couldn't resist writing it down and pretending it was mine, but I couldn't think of any more." "But what are you going to do when you've got to the part?" she said. "Make it up, of course," he said. "I've done that before. I often do it. I enjoy the risk, you see. I start telling a story with no idea what's going to happen at the end, and I make it up when I get there. Sometimes it's even better than writing it down first. I am sure I could do it with this one. But when the door opened and the old man came in, I must have panicked. Oh, I wish I'd never begun. I'll never tell a story again." "Let's tell the end of this one, though," said Gretel. "Or something bad will happen. You've got to." "I can't." "You must." "I couldn't." "You have to." "Impossible," he said. "I can't control it any more. I wound it up and set it going, and it'll just have to work itself out. I washed my hands of it. I'm off." "But you can't. Where are you going?" "Anywhere. Berlin, Vienna, Prague, as far away as I can get." And he poured himself another glass of plum brandy and swallowed it all in one go. So Gretel sighed and turned to leave. At the same time as she was feeling her way down the dark stairs in Fritz's lodging house, Karl was going back into the inn. He'd taken little Florian up to the clock tower and fastened him to the frame, ignoring the prince's helpless struggles and his musical requests for mercy. When morning came, there he would be, Karl's masterpiece on show as everyone expected, and Karl would receive everyone's congratulations and his certificate of competence from Herr Ringelmann, and he'd been entered in the role of master clockwork makers. And then he could leave town and make his way with Sir Ironsoul into the wide world, where power and fortune awaited him. But when he opened the door of the inn to collect the little knight and hide him in his lodgings, he felt a shudder of fear. He stood on the threshold, afraid and unwilling to enter, and once again he took no notice of Putsy the cat, who jumped down from the window-sill where he saw the door open. There's no need to be superstitious about cats, but they are our fellow creatures, and we shouldn't ignore them. It would have been polite of Karl to offer his knuckles for the old cat to rub his head against, but Karl was wound up too tightly for politeness, so he didn't see the cat stalking him past his legs. Karl gathered his courage and went in. How still the room was, and how sinister the little figure under the canvas, and that sword point, how wickedly sharp! Sharp enough to have pierced the canvas already, and be glinting in the lamplight. Coals settled in the stove, sending a little flare of red out on the floor, and making Karl jump nervously. The glow made him think of the fires of hell, and he sweated and mopped his brow. Then the long case clock in the corner began to whir and whiz, preparing to strike. Karl leapt as if he'd been discovered in the act of murder, and then leaned weakly against the table, his heart beating like thunder. "Oh, I can't bear this," he said. "I've done nothing wrong, have I? Then why am I so nervous? What is there to be frightened of?" Hearing his words, old Patsy decided here was someone who could give him a little milk, if he asked nicely. So the cat jumped up on the table beside him and rubbed himself on Karl's arm. Feeling this, Karl turned in shock to see the black cat, who had appeared, as it seemed, out of nowhere. Naturally, this was too much for Karl. He leapt away from the table with an exclamation of horror. "Oh, what the devil!" And then he clapped his hands to his mouth as if trying to cram the word back inside, but it was too late. In the corner of the room, the metal figure had begun to move. The canvas fell to the floor, and Sir Ironsole raised his sword even higher and turned his helmet this way and that until he saw where Carl was cowering. No, no, stop, wait, the tune, let me whistle the tune. But his lips were too dry. Frantic, he licked them with a dry tongue. No use, he couldn't produce a sound. Nearer and nearer came the little knight with the sharp sword, and Carl stumbled away, trying to hum, trying to whistle, trying to sing, and all he could do was cry and stammer and sob. And the knight came closer and closer. When Gretel got back to the inn, she heard Putsy meowing inside, and said as she opened the door, "How did you get in, silly cat?" Putsy shot out into the square as Gretel came in, and wouldn't stop to be petted. She shut the door and looked around for the prince, but she didn't see him anywhere. Instead, a horrid sight met her eyes, and made her shiver, and made her clutch her breast. There, in the middle of the room, stood Sir Ironsole, with his helmet shining blankly, his sword slanting down. He was holding it like that because the point was in the throat of Carl the apprentice, who lay stark dead beside him. Gretel nearly fainted, but she was a brave girl, and she had seen what lay in Carl's hand. It was the iron-heavy key of the clock tower. With her mind in a whirl, she was still able to guess part of what had happened, if not all of it, and she realized that what Carl must have done with the prince. She took the key from his hand and ran out of the inn, across the square to the great dark tower. She turned the key in the lock and began to climb for the second time that night. But these stairs were higher and steeper than those in Fritz's lodging, and they were darker too, and there were bats that flitted through the air, and the wind groaned across the mouths of the mighty bells, and made their ropes swing dismally. But up and up she climbed, until she came to the lowest of the clock chambers, where the oldest and simplest part of the mechanism was housed. In the darkness she felt her way around the huge iron cog wheels, the thick ropes, the stiff metal figures of Saint Wolfgang and the devil. But she didn't find the prince, and so she climbed on. She ran her hands over the Archangel Michael, and in his armour he reminded her of Sir Ironsole, and she took her hands away quickly. She felt up the side of a figure in a painted robe, and her fingers explored his face until she realized that it was the skull face of death. And she took her hands away for him too.